I've done nofap, no masturbation for 3 years. If you want to see how I did it and what it did for me, stick around to the end of this video. I'm going to take you guys on a workout. Let's get started. Is it possible to stop masturbating altogether? What would happen if you cold turkey just stopped masturbating? Would it affect your brain? Would it affect your body? Would it affect your urges? Would it affect your emotional state? And actually, I think underlyingly, you're wondering, is it even worth doing? Is it even worth putting in the effort to push through these urges? Because after all, you've been relying on it for so long. It's been part of your life. Everyone else is doing it. And let's admit it, it feels good, right? It's enjoyable. At the end of the day, the ultimate reason that your brain tells you why you should keep going back at masturbation to porn is because it feels good. That's it. So does doing drugs, so does doing cocaine, heroin, all this stuff, right? So you really have to ask yourself many series of questions that I'm gonna give to you guys right now that I've prepared for you. I think that would be the first one that I would start with is, it might feel good short term, but if you think about your life in the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, has it actually felt good long term? Meaning, do you feel good as a whole overall about having this habit in your life? Because it's tempting to say like, oh yeah, it just feels good and that's why I do it. But if you look at your life from a snapshot of decades from now, years from now, when you're in a relationship, when you're married, has this habit caused you more enjoyment or more pain in your life? And in most cases, if people are addicted to a behavior, they ask themselves short term, yeah, I like it, that's why I do it, it feels good. But if I look at my life from the last 10 years, 20 years, since I started doing this thing, actually it's caused me a lot of pain, a lot of torment, a lot of feelings of hypocrisy, lack of confidence, lots of feelings like, what am I doing with my life? So I'm gonna list you a series of questions to help you identify exactly, number one, what's gonna happen to you specifically if you stop masturbating, and number two, is it worth actually doing? All right, and let's break this down. Because I think at the back of your mind, there's this feeling of like, oh, I don't even know if I wanna commit to this. So the first question I'm gonna ask you, which is the most important one, which is, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do with your sex drive? What do you want to do with your drive, your urges? What do you want to do with your energy? Because after all, sex drive is a God-given thing. Sex drive is a beautiful thing. I dropped my notes. And so the reason it's really important to ask yourself what do you want is because at the end of the day, you're gonna do whatever you want. You're gonna go down the path that's gonna lead you towards doing what you want at the end of the day. So you have to be deliberate and strategic about answering the question first and foremost, what do you wanna do with your sexual energy? Do you want to be somebody that masturbates? And you are completely content and fine with that, okay, sure. Or do you wanna be somebody that uses your drive for bigger things, for better things, for your wife or future wife, for God, for getting stuff done, for creating stuff, for working out? Like, do you want to be somebody that succumbs to being controlled, or do you want to be in control? So that's number one. There's nothing I can say that is going to stop you from masturbating if that's what you want to do. But if it's something you don't want to do, which is chances are you don't, then that's a different question. Because then that comes into the equation of integrity. Because integrity means that you are who you say you are, and you are who you strive to be, and you are acting in accordance with the man that you plan to be and that you want to be in your life. And the feelings of lack of integrity come from just this torment of, I want to be here, I want to be a man that doesn't masturbate, that doesn't watch porn, but at the same time I'm tempted drastically to go down that road. And that's the feeling of lack of integrity that you feel, the feeling of inauthenticity, the feeling of lack of confidence when you look at your partner or someone in the eyes, or look at your parent in the eyes, and you feel like you're hiding something, you feel like you're living a lie. That's the feeling of torment. That's the feeling of shadows in your life. And chances are, if you are somebody that doesn't want to have this habit in your life, then you found the right video, my friend. The other reason this question is vastly important is because at the end of the day, the ultimate justification your brain will play is, well, I want to do it. Well, I want to do it because it feels good. But this is kind of like a trump card that you can say to your brain, that little dopamine brain that's trying to get that hit of porn, masturbation, whatever it is. You can just say to it, well, I don't want to. Because there's nothing that you yourself or anyone else can justify or rationalize or make an excuse for, or reason for why it's okay. Nothing. Have you ever been to a situation like a party or something like that, and people are drinking or smoking and you don't do that stuff, or doing drugs, whatever, and people are like, oh, like, hey, would you like to drink or do some drugs or something? And you're like, I don't want to. And you find yourself like making all these reasons why you have to explain to your friends in this social setting why you don't do the thing. But ultimately, the only thing you have to say is like, I don't want to. And they'll say, but why don't you want it? It's like, well, I don't want to. Because there's nothing else that needs to be said. You just say, I just don't want to do it. And that's it. And it's not just for other people. The most important thing is your own opinion, your own reasonings, because at the very, very last corner that you turn that leads you to masturbating, that leads you to watching porn, that final decision you have to make to say yes or no, it really comes down to you being able to play that trump card and say, well, brain, well, self, I don't want to. So I'm just not going to do it because I don't want to. And then your brain's going to say, like, but why not? It's going to make you feel better. It's going to alleviate all your stress and your boredom. And then you're going to say, well, I don't want to do it because that's not the man I am. Now, the other side of this question is equally important, which is what do you not want to do? Who do you not want to be? What would happen if you continue to go down this path of masturbating, watching porn? What would happen? Literally write it out and ask yourself this. Chances are you would probably develop a more severe addiction, as you probably have already. You would probably become more dependent on it as life goes on. You would probably become less sensitized to or desensitized to the emotions of guilt and shame, which naturally come with feelings of discrepancy in our integrity, right? In our morality and our values. You would probably bring this habit into your relationship, right? I mean, like, what are the chances that as soon as you're in a relationship or married, this is going to go away? Guys, trust me from experience and talking with hundreds of men in this exact situation, it doesn't go away. And the reason that is because it's an addiction. And the reason addiction is called an addiction is because it's hard to get rid of. And by definition, a bad habit is something that you bring with you even if you don't want to. And that's why people are delusioned into thinking that when they're in a relationship, this will magically go away. But it's less to do with a sexual addiction and more to do with an emotional dependency you have. And as long as you're bringing that emotional dependency, the reason, the root cause, the reason that you have this habit in the first place, the reason you keep going back to it even though you hate it and don't want it, that root reason you're going to bring with you into your life, into your marriage, into your career, into that new house you're going to buy, into that new country, into that new year, into that new month. Every milestone you surpass and say, okay, now I'm here and now I don't need this anymore, you're going to bring it with you. Why? Because you're not addressing the reason at hand, the reason you keep going back to it, all right? And so ask yourself, what would happen if you continued down this road? And is that really where you want to go? All right? And that'll help you to make that trump card in your brain that you can play anytime you're feeling triggered and say, hey, you know what? I want to do it temporary, short term, but long term, I don't want to do it. It's not who I want to be. The next question I want you to ask yourself is, how has my habit developed over time? Now imagine the first time you masturbated and imagine now when you masturbate. How has your response to it internally shifted and changed over the years? How has your sensitization or desensitization changed over the year? Many times when people start masturbating, the first time they do it, it's actually quite freaky and quite scary and quite alarming and quite a striking experience where they go, that was weird, like, and uncomfortable and kind of disgusting. I'm kind of disgusted myself. And that usually lasts for a few years. And then after time, people are desensitized to it, usually because people are watching porn. In fact, most people that masturbate are watching porn while they do it. They're desensitized to sexualization. Their penis is not erect on a physical level. People are affected and they're changing, right? On an emotional level, people find that maybe you are becoming more and more irritated and agitated, especially if you don't get your release and what you want. You feel more stressed. You feel like you aren't able to handle boredom or loneliness as well, because that's usually the time where you go back to masturbation and watching porn. So if that's the case, where you find yourself that your habit has developed in severity over time, it's a really important time right now to honestly look in the mirror and say, hey, is this really the path I want to go down? Is this really healthy? And all the justifications, guys, I get it. You could justify the hell out of masturbation habit. Everyone on planet Earth is doing it. Most people you ask just on the street, is masturbation healthy? Everyone's gonna say absolutely yes. And the only response I have to that is, well, what do you want? What do you want? People are not understanding that masturbation is a serious addiction. Usually develops in severity over time. That's something people don't consider. Usually almost everybody is watching porn. In fact, according to one study I read, 75%, a whole 3/4, the vast majority of people that are masturbating are watching porn while they're masturbating. So it's a complete fallacy that people are just masturbating without watching porn. It's not happening. And I've never met, of all the years I talk with almost everyday men who are addicted to porn and masturbation, I've never met somebody ever who can just masturbate and not eventually lead to porn, ever. People say like, oh, I'm just gonna try to disassociate them and just masturbate without watching porn, without thinking of anything. I've never met someone that successfully did that didn't eventually lead them to watching porn, ever. It doesn't happen. Why? And that's what we get into the next point, okay? Which is about dopamine. We'll talk about in just a second, dopamine and how if you stop masturbating, how it's going to affect your brain in a positive way, okay? The other question I want to ask you guys is, what are your triggers? No, not the Instagram models, not the stuff you see on YouTube and TikTok and whatever. I'm talking about the emotional triggers, the real triggers, the root triggers. The triggers of, I'm just stressed out of my mind and I don't know how to deal with this, so I'm gonna go to porn or masturbation. I am bored and I don't know how to be bored, and nothing is helping me not be bored, so I'm gonna go to masturbation. I'm lonely, I have no one in my life, and I'm just wanna go to masturbation because it helps soothe that emotion. What are your triggers? And the reason this is important is because if you can identify your primary emotional triggers, internal triggers that lead you to wanting to act out, then you can actually address the root issue. And this is why almost everyone fails at nofap and trying to push their way through just sheer willpower and brute force through an addiction, is because nobody is addressing the root issue. Nobody. Of all the videos I've seen on this topic, nobody actually talks about the root issue of why people act out. And the fact that masturbation is a symptom of something deeper. People just assume it's, oh, people need sexual release. Everyone needs sexual release, and that's why people masturbate. And if you just push through it hard enough, then you'll be fine. It doesn't happen. Because if you just push through it with sheer willpower, eventually you will develop another addiction. Eventually, you will develop addiction to gaming, video games, social media, your phone, anger, violence, drugs, alcohol, smoking, all this stuff. Because you're not addressing the root issue. But if you address the root issue while you're abstaining from the habit, then what happens is that you see a decrease in your urge and desire to act out, because you've addressed the thing that's causing you to want to act out, and therefore you won't need to or desire to go back to it anymore. In effect, you will not even want to masturbate anymore because you've just addressed the root issue at hand, okay? So what are your triggers? What are the primary roadblock triggers that are keeping you going back to it? The stress, boredom, loneliness, depression, anxiety, uncertainty, fear, and address those emotions. And guys, take this from many years of experiencing men, helping men quit porn and masturbation. If you can address the primary big roadblock that's keeping you going back to the habit, then your chances of beating it will skyrocket, because you won't need it so much as a dependency. So I encourage you just to identify the one emotion that you feel like is just causing you to wanting to escape life and escape to this habit, and then address that. And the more you address that and figure out healthy ways to deal with the emotion, then the less you will want to escape to masturbation, to porn, to whatever it is. And you will be addressing and healing the root issue, all right? This is a really important one. What do you guys want to do with your drive? What do you want to do with that excess energy? The sexual energy is a creative energy. It was given to us, I believe, by God to create life, to give life, to serve, to attack, to protect. It's a masculine drive that we all have. Now, whatever you guys want to do with that drive is entirely up to you. It's entirely up to you. And there's a million things to do. No, there's a billion things that you can do with your drive that are better than masturbating. But you have just found that the easiest way for you to escape life, to deal with emotions, is to just go back to the old habit. But what do you want to do with it? Exactly, write it down. What is the thing that you want to spend your time and energy doing? And as you become more passionate and convicted and excited in that thing that you're doing, that project, that business, that relationship you want to improve, that sport you want to get excellent at, that whatever it is, guys, you want to do, that YouTube channel you want to start, podcast you want to start, those people you want to help, those people you want to serve, that country you want to travel to. If you get excited about that, the more and the more you will utilize that energy, guys. And remember the last time that you didn't struggle at all with masturbation. You didn't even think about it. You didn't even consider it for months or weeks or years even. And before you knew it, you were like, man, I haven't thought about it in like so long. What happened? Probably is because you were so excited about life. You were so busy. You were so thrilled. You were using your drive, your energy, your focus, your attention, your time for things that God intended those things to be used for. All right? God did not give us free will, energy, drive, so that we can just watch porn and masturbate and go on social media into oblivion. Totally unnatural. Totally unnecessary. But as you find more natural, holistic, God-given ways to utilize your drive, the less of a desire you will have to act out, because you won't need to, because you're using that drive and energy for something that it's meant for, all right? So what'll happen if you stop masturbating to your brain and the dopamine levels in your brain? Let's talk about dopamine. Dopamine is freaking real, guys. It's not a hippie, trendy thing that people talk about in the internet because they're trying to sound smarter than everyone else. It is a real freaking thing. Let me break down exactly what it is in one sentence. Dopamine is telling you that if you don't engage in X behavior, you are going to die. It is literally telling you, if you don't masturbate, if you don't watch porn, if you don't go on your phone, you are going to die, and therefore you absolutely need it in order to live, in order to sustain life. You need it biologically. Is that true? No. How do we know that? Because millions of people, no, billions of people throughout history have abstained from masturbating and have been just fine. And it's a complete fallacy that everyone in the world is saying that you need masturbation, otherwise you're going to explode. Otherwise you're going to become a rapist. Otherwise you're going to be just going off exploding with sexually all the time. No, it's not true. So it's a literal brain chemistry thing that is telling you that you need to masturbate, otherwise you are not going to survive. And this has been trained into your brain over time because of the stuff you've been exposed to, the porn you've been exposed to, the social media, the fantasies you've been exposing yourself to, has trained your brain that you need this. Which means, my friend, that you can untrain your brain. You can detox off this stuff and untrain your brain. And what will happen to your brain when you just stop masturbating, just cold turkey, just stop this? What will happen is that you will start being attracted to good women that will provide long-term relationship, connection, and children with, naturally, okay? Because the dopamine is telling you that you need this in order to procreate. You need this because it's giving life. It's not, obviously, but it's tricked you into believing that. Porn has tricked you into believing that. So as you detox off this stuff, you will naturally see women not as some Instagram model, not some 10 out of 10 beautiful person, but as a genuine, sincere, God-given daughter, a woman that will give you children, that will raise your children, that will be a good person for you. And naturally, women will be attracted to you of the same caliber, of the same frequency, that are operating at the same level, guys. And that's what you want ultimately, isn't it? You're thinking short term. It's time to stop thinking short term. If you're thinking long term, the kind of woman that you want in your life, the kind of marriage and relationship you want, are the ones that are going to provide real children, real intimacy, not artificial, fake shit that you've been trained into believing is essential to life. It's not. Masturbation is not essential to life. You don't need it. And everyone is saying, like, if you go on the internet for 5 seconds, like, well, masturbation is healthy. It's going to give you prostate cancer if you don't masturbate. Says who? Like, it's ridiculous how if you go to any of these articles, any of these videos, they will list all the amazing potential possible benefits of masturbating and why it's so good for you. And at the very end, they'll talk about all the risks that nobody talks about. The little square that says, oh, by the way, if you develop an addiction to masturbating, then you should seek medical professional help. And then they don't realize that almost everybody is addicted to masturbating, right? If you don't think that's true, ask yourself, just stop. Why can't you stop? If you can say you're not addicted, go 40 days without masturbating and come back to me and say, oh, that was a piece of cake. Go ahead, do that. And if you can come back and tell me that was a piece of cake, then I'll say, okay, fine, you're not addicted. But almost everyone is addicted to masturbating and watching porn, and nobody is talking about that, and everyone is going and reading these articles and saying, hey, it's healthy, it's good for you, it's amazing, it's natural. It's the same as saying that pizza is healthy for you. It's got all these benefits. It's got protein, it's got macros, micros, it's got nutritional value, it's got calories, it's gonna sustain your life, it's gonna have all these benefits, right? And then it's talking about all those micro possible benefits, and it's not talking about the vast majority of risks associated with a lifestyle of eating pizza every day. And that's what people are doing, metaphorically, eating pizza every day. So what happens if you stop eating shit? If you stop masturbating, you're gonna see the benefits of not masturbating every day. You're gonna see the benefits of not eating like a piece of garbage every day. So that's the real benefits we're talking about, is when you remove an addictive behavior, guys, then you start to see the benefits of not having that addictive behavior anymore. You start having mood regulation. You start having sincere relationships. You start using all the emotions and drive and triggers and sexual urges for things that they're meant to be used for. That's really what happens when you get off this stuff, guys. That's it. So dopamine is real. It's seriously affecting your brain. And you've got to detox off this stuff, because if you don't, you're going to be eternally trying to find a spouse, or in a biological way, and maybe even implicitly, subconsciously trying to find a spouse, but not actually letting yourself find a real woman, because you're so addicted and dependent on an artificial form of release that you've been relying on for so many years. Okay, let's talk about urges now. This is the main concern. If you stop, is it worth doing because of all the urges that are gonna come? Am I gonna sit here and tell you you're not gonna have sexual urges? No. But, caveat, the sexual urges are hints. It's a hint that there's something underlying that's going on. There's something underlying that needs to be dealt with. And the reason you've developed this masturbation habit, I'm willing to bet, from a very young age, 11, 12, 13 years old, is because when you were feeling emotions like stress, boredom, loneliness, depression, anxiety, and you just didn't know how to deal with those emotions because we're young and stupid, the first thing that people go to usually is porn, and then they develop a masturbation dependency coupled with that and associated with that. So if you're feeling these sexual urges, usually it's a hint that there's something underlying, an emotional need that's not ever been dealt with in a productive way, and it's always been numbed and squashed down, because let's be real, you could be stressed out of your mind. Come home from work, just stressed, anxious, depressed, lonely, and you could go to porn, just masturbate, fantasize, and immediately just completely numb all those emotions. Go from 100 to 0 in an instant. How healthy can that be for you? From an emotional standpoint, internal standpoint, from a brain chemical standpoint, completely unnatural. So the way to not feel urges is to address the root issue. And as you address the reasons why you feel this desire to escape, this desire to act out, your urges will naturally decrease, all right? And what's important is that you'll have an opportunity to use that urge. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys that you should just ignore your urges. It's like, that's a biological thing. But after you've detoxed, what I'm saying is that after you've trained your brain through a series of watching content online to develop a need and dependency on masturbation. So after you detox that stuff, you will desire sexuality in a more natural and holistic and healthy way, a productive way. And that's really what it's meant to be used for. So that, I'm not saying you should squash down, but you should find a way to direct that for productive things in your life. And that doesn't mean just sleeping around and finding women. I'm not saying that either, because that can be a serious addiction as well. I'm saying that there are things that you are meant to use your drive for as a young man that has never been utilized for. Things like starting your careers, things like working on a business, things like finding a spouse, things like whatever you want to do, sports, athleticism, hunting, and using that. And you've never been able to do that because you rely on masturbation to squash emotions and that drive for so long, all right? The last thing that you'll get from stopping masturbation is the confidence. Where does this confidence come from that people are talking about? It comes from the fact that until now in your life, quitting masturbation, porn, has been the absolute hardest thing you've ever had to deal with. Am I right? Willing to bet, it's true. Hardest thing, that's what she said. But when you actually have control over the hardest thing, the biggest demon, dragon that you've never slayed, ever been able to slay, and you can say, I have control over this thing, the confidence that you get is something that is intrinsic. It is internal. It comes from within. It's not something that anybody else has to tell you or validate for you. It comes from the fact that knowing that I can slay the most difficult challenge in my entire life, and I can confidently say that I can do absolutely anything. If I can do that, there's nothing I can't conquer. And that's where the confidence really comes from. All right, just came home. I did nofap, just cold turkey, no masturbation, no porn for 3 years as part of my preparation for marriage. When I was 16 years old, I had kind of a really strong conversional experience where I experienced God and I felt God deeply in my life. And then for the next 3 years after that, I prepared myself as intensely as I could for marriage. And I abstained for those 3 years completely 100% from all forms of porn, sexual content, in masturbation. And what I got from that experience is the confidence I'm talking about. Is like, oh, this is what my drive is for. Because I was so confused for so long in my life. I started masturbating when I was 11 years old. The first time I masturbated, I felt absolutely disgusted in myself. I felt like I was committing some grave sin. Like I was some kind of evil human being. And I think in hindsight, the feeling I was feeling was this is not how my sexual organ, my reproductive organ, my penis was meant to be used. Just for myself as some 11-year-old kid, jerking off 3-4 times a day even. And I just felt like this disgust in myself. Like, this is not how I want to live my life. This is not the man that I want to be. This is not the person, the habit that I want to have moving forward in my life and I want to bring with me. And so from that day forward, I was like, I really don't like this. And that was for years. I was just masturbating, watching porn as well, because most people watch porn when they masturbate. That's the fact. And then when I was 16, I was like, I don't like this. And I kept justifying it, as everyone does, like, oh, it's okay in moderation. I'm a sexual being. This is part of my biology. But I just hated the feeling because I knew it was destroying my brain, the dopamine in my brain. I knew something was desensitizing me, and I knew I was not looking at women from a holistic, holy, and healthy perspective, a godly perspective. And instead, I was using my sex drive for myself and for me, which is not what I believe and I believed it was meant for. I believed that it was meant to be given to my spouse, to my partner. I believed that it was meant for something, for having children. And I wanted to use it for that. So I spent those 3 years devoutly focusing on myself, my internal growth, focusing on my career, focusing on my schoolwork, sports, working out, that kind of thing. And then during that time, I naturally gravitated to wanting to be in a relationship. I naturally wanted to just grab onto a long-term committed thing and have children, right? So it's not common in today's world, but I found my wife when I was 18 years old, and we married, and I had my first child when I was 22 years old, just 4 years after marriage, right? Which might seem like a young time to have kids, but for us, it was like, we're 4 years into this marriage thing, we might as well have kids. Like, if the kids aren't coming soon, then what's the point of this relationship? Honestly, that's how I felt. Like, isn't this the whole point of being a man and having this sex drive is to procreate and to have kids and experience that in my life? And so I really wanted that. And this comes back to my original point in this video. It's like, I really wanted to be a man that uses my drive and my sex energy for creating things, for doing epic things, for being married, being in a relationship, and having children. And that's what I found after abstaining and just cutting it out of my life, is that I naturally recalibrated my dopamine system so that I would be drawn towards a woman that would give me that, and that woman would be drawn towards me because we share that energy, we share that vibrance, right? And so that's been my experience. I think it was the greatest decision I ever made in my life, because if I didn't do that, I know for a fact that to this day, I would still be addicted. I would still be going down that path of just justifying, rationalizing like everyone else does. Masturbation is fine. I need this. It's part of my sexual being as a man. And it was all the brain's trickery. It was the training of my brain over many years of indulging in the dopamine hits, the dopamine floods, that was telling me in my brain, you need this. You deserve this. You absolutely do. But then I realized, actually, I don't. Because there are billions of people around the world that aren't practicing masturbation, that are abstaining from this, from sexual activity of all kinds, and they're living perfectly happy lives. And they are able to use that drive for productive things, for life-giving things, for creative things. And I learned that my sex drive is a creative energy. It's a creative energy. And to use that properly, I need to find things to create and put in my creative energy into, whether that's sports, whether that's working out, whether that's a project, a hobby, art itself, music, whatever it is. I want to use it for that, and I don't want to use it for myself. And I don't think that's what God gave us that energy for. It's just for me to satisfy my own needs and my own desires so that I can feel good about myself and I can say that I'm a good person and I'm using my sexual drive for... It's like, no, that's not who I wanted to be. And so, if you're with me on this, guys, let me tell you and remind you, you absolutely can abstain from this stuff. It's just a matter of you deciding what you really want in your life and going after it. It's about you deciding that you don't want this habit in your life anymore. It's about you deciding that you want to be a man of true integrity and caliber. Integrity means, guys, what you want with your life and where you're going with your actions are the same. They're aligned. That's what integrity is. Words and action, two become one. And if you're living like that, you will be unstoppable, okay? Give it some time with no masturbation, cold turkey, no porn, no masturbation. Do it for 2 weeks. See how you feel. And then after 2 weeks, evaluate how you're feeling after that. Exactly how do I feel right now after doing this for 2 weeks? If you feel better, make note of it and keep going. Just keep doing it. And like I said before, you have to address the root reasons, the emotional triggers that usually lead you to wanting to masturbate, because otherwise you'll have uncontrollable desires and urges. And you won't feel those uncontrollable desires if you really understand the root reason why you're escaping to porn, to masturbation, and you address those. And the more you address those, the guarantee I have for you is that you will see a significant decrease in your desire to act out, and you will be unstoppable, and you can do anything with that amount of confidence. If this has been helpful for you guys, like the video, subscribe, stick around, and I'll see you in the next video.